Joe Baksi's story begins deep in the coal-stained heart of Culpmont, Pennsylvania, a place where the air was thick with dust and dreams were buried as deep as the mines themselves. His parents had crossed an ocean from Austria-Hungary, chasing a better life. But what they found was the darkness of the mines and the struggle of survival. Joe was just another miner's son, his hands already calloused before he was a man. He didn't dream of boxing gloves, he dreamed of escape. Boxing, he once said, I only saw it as a ticket out of the coal mines. And that's exactly what it became, his way out of the dark and into the world. In 1940, at just 18 years old, Joe laced up his gloves and stepped into a new kind of fight. That year, he tore through 9 opponents like a man possessed. Each punch he threw carried the weight of his hometown, every swing fueled by the thought of never going back underground. One of those he defeated was a tough young fighter named Jack Brazzo, who the world would later know as Hollywood actor Jack Palance. It wasn't just boxing for Joe Baksi. It was survival, redemption, and defiance wrapped inside a pair of gloves. He wasn't born into fame or privilege. He clawed his way toward it with sweat, pain, and the stubborn will of a man who refused to let his story end in the cold dust. For years, Joe Baksi had fought his way across smoky halls and small-town rings, one fight at a time, chasing something bigger than a payday. Then, on February 25, 1944, his moment finally came. Madison Square Garden. Across the ring stood Tammy Moriello, the Bronx powerhouse, the favorite, the man everyone believed would crush the coal miner's son. But Joe Baksi didn't care about odds or predictions. He came to fight. He was bigger, heavier, 210 pounds of hard labor and heart. Moriello had the experience, but Joe had something you couldn't measure: hunger. When the bell rang, Baksi came forward like a man who had nothing to lose. Late in the first round, he caught Tammy with a clean left hook, a thunderbolt that sent the favorite crashing to canvas. The garden erupted. Moriello barely beat the count, but the damage was done. For the rest of the fight, Baksi hounded him, refusing to back down. When it was over, the judges had no choice. Joe Baksi won by unanimous decision. The crowd loved him. The newspapers called it an upset. For Joe, it was proof he belonged. That one made him a name overnight. Just 2 weeks later, he was back at the Garden, this time against Lee Savile, a slick veteran and a man who had already beaten Moriello twice. Everyone thought Joe's size and momentum would carry him through, but experience has a way of humbling even the strongest. Baksi started slow, found his rhythm late, and gave Savile all he could handle in the 9th and 10th rounds. But Savile's jab and timing carried the night. A split decision loss for Joe. Still, he wasn't done. Not even close. The rematch was set for March 10th, 1944, and this time, Savile was the favorite. Baksi had tasted both victory and defeat on the biggest stage, and he was ready to show the world that a boy from the mines could rise again. When Joe Baksi stepped back into the ring for the rematch with Lee Savile, he was a different man. The loss from 2 weeks earlier hadn't broken him. It had sharpened him. He came in leaner, stronger, and more focused than ever before. This wasn't just another fight. It was a chance to prove that his first victory at Madison Square Garden wasn't luck. It was real. From the opening bell, Baksi surprised everyone. The man known for his power started fighting smart, using his jab to control the pace. Savile was famous for having one of the best left hands in the heavyweight division. But that night, Joe outdashed left-handed, the southpaw master himself. Every round, Baksi's punches found their mark. Steady, punishing, relentless. By the final bell, Savile's face told the story. His left eye was split, his nose and mouth were bleeding, and his ribs looked like they'd been through a grinder. Joe's only mark of battle was a broken nose, a small price for redemption. When the judges read the scores, it was unanimous. Joe Baksi had done it. The boy from the coal mines had climbed to 4th place in the National Boxing Association rankings, right behind the great Joe Louis, Billy Conn, and Jimmy Bivens. He wasn't just fighting anymore. He was standing among giants. And just to leave no doubts, Baksi met Savile again on August 7th, 1944, and beat him once more. Each punch, each victory, carried him further from the mines and closer to the legend he was building with his own 2 hands. Fresh off his win over Lee Savile, Joe Baksi was riding high. He followed up with another victory, stopping the tough Finnish fighter Gunnar Berglund, known to fans as GB. Every fight seemed to push Baksi closer to the top, and his confidence grew with each passing round. Next up was a familiar face, his old sparring partner, Lee Savile. The bout was set for January 28, 1945. Just months earlier, Savile had been a relative unknown, but his gutsy performance against Tammy Moriello had turned heads. He had even earned a rematch with Moriello in December and pulled off an upset win. Now, he was stepping into the ring with Baksi, but the odds were stacked against him. Joe Baksi was the heavy favorite, 1-3, and for good reason. He outweighed Savile by 25 pounds, stood taller, hit harder, and had the experience to match. On paper, it looked like another step forward on Baksi's march toward a title shot. But boxing has a way of humbling even the strongest man. In the days before the fight, Joe had been fighting something else, a bad cold that left him sluggish and unfocused. When the bell rang, that spark, that fire he was known for, just wasn't there. Savile fought smart, using his movement and timing to frustrate Baksi. Joe tried to rally late, showing flashes of the power that had made him famous, but it was too little, too late. When the final bell sounded, the decision was unanimous. Lee Savile had outboxed his former sparring partner. For Baksi, it was a bitter pill to swallow. He had the tools, the strength, and the heart, but that night, his body had betrayed him. It was a reminder that in boxing, even a coal miner's toughness couldn't fight off everything. After his setback against Lee Savile, Joe Baksi didn't retreat. He came back swinging. On March 30th, he stepped into the ring with veteran Lou Nova, a man once considered a top contender. From the opening bell, Baksi took control. In the fourth round, he landed a brutal left hook to the ribs that folded Nova like paper. Nova stayed down for a count of 9, barely managing to rise, but Joe never let up. When it was over, the decision was unanimous. Baksi had won, and the message was clear. He was back. That victory pushed Joe to the number 2 spot among the wartime heavyweights, right behind the legendary Joe Louis. His confidence soared, and he breezed through his next opponents, Lee Dixie Oliver and Larry Lane, collecting easy decision wins that kept his momentum alive. Then came a matchup that few thought would be a problem, 31-year-old Jersey Joe Walcott. Walcott was talented but had a patchy record and was seen as a fading fighter. Most expected Baksi's size and power to overwhelm him. But that night, the boxing gods had other plans. Walcott danced, slipped, and spun out of danger, turning the ring into his own stage. Every time Baksi tried to close in, Jersey Joe made him miss, and then made him pay. Sharp hooks and quick counters wore Baksi down, leaving him dazed and frustrated. When the final bell rang, the single referee's card read 6-3, 1 for Walcott. The upset stunned the crowd. Joe tried to shake it off, but his next bout against Jimmy Bell brought more frustration. A split decision loss made worse by 2-round penalties for low blows. Still, true to his nature, Baksi didn't crumble. He went back to the grind, stacked up 4 straight wins, and then packed his bags for Europe, ready to test his luck and his fists on a new stage, far from the American spotlight that had both lifted and tested him. In the fall of 1946, Joe Baksi boarded a ship bound for Europe, a coal miner turned contender, chasing glory across the Atlantic. He was going to face the best Britain had to offer, and he carried with him not just his gloves, but the pride of a fighter who had clawed his way out of the dirt. His first stop was London, to take on Freddie Mills, the British light heavyweight champion, a national hero known for his toughness and heart. When the bell rang, Baksi looked a little flat in the opening round, but that didn't last. In the second, his heavy punches started finding their mark, opening a cut over Mills' right eye, then another over the left. By the third, Mills was bleeding badly, and the American kept coming. Round after round, Baksi's power and pressure broke the Brit down until, by the end of the 6th, Mills had nothing left to give. He quit on his stool, battered, bleeding, and beaten. Next came the big one, Bruce Woodcock, the reigning British heavyweight champion. It was April 15th, 1947, a night British fans wouldn't forget. From the opening bell, Baksi exploded. He dropped Woodcock 3 times in the first round, twice more in the second. The crowd roared for their man, and somehow, Woodcock fought back in the 5th, showing incredible heart. But Joe was relentless, pounding away until the referee finally stepped in during the 7th. Woodcock's jaw was broken, and Baksi stood tall, the American conqueror of Britain's best. But Joe wasn't just there to fight. He was there to connect. After the battles, he traveled to Prague to meet his relatives, reconnecting with his roots in Czechoslovakia. Then he returned to Britain, this time not as a boxer, but as a guest of honor, touring coal mines alongside Fuel Minister Manny Shinwell. At one mine, a furious young boy named Brian Blessed, who would later become a famous actor, confronted him, angry that his hero Bruce Woodcock had been beaten by the American. Baksi smiled and took it in stride. He wasn't just a fighter anymore. He'd become a symbol, a miner who made it out, but never forgot where he came from. He visited Butlin's holiday camp in Filey, where he met with Woodcock again, both men smiling for photos, their rivalry now turned to respect. Before heading home, he stopped in Ireland to attend the European Amateur Boxing Championships in Dublin. The next day, in Wexford, he was honored as a special guest at a boxing event, where he presented the Baksi Cup to a young fighter named Sean Mansfield for the night's best performance. For Joe Baksi, the trip was more than a series of fights. It was a victory lap for the coal miner's son who had crossed oceans, broken jaws, and built a name that reached far beyond the mines of Pennsylvania. Joe Baksi's triumph over Bruce Woodcock had set the stage for the biggest opportunity of his life, a shot at the great Joe Louis for the world heavyweight title. The coal miner's son from Pennsylvania was one fight away from standing on top of the boxing world. But fate had other plans. While still in Europe, Baksi agreed to one more bout, a matchup in Stockholm against Sweden's national hero, Al Tamberg. On paper, it looked like an easy night. Baksi was riding a 6-fight win streak, 5 of them knockouts. He was the 1-5 favorite to win, and the smart money said he'd knock Tamberg out before the 7th round. Tamberg, a young fighter who'd only been boxing since 1943, had never faced a man of Baksi's caliber. Everything pointed toward another Baksi victory. But boxing, as always, is a game of surprises. From the opening bell, Tamberg fought cautiously, moving, jabbing, surviving. Baksi chased, through heavy leather, but something fell off, his rhythm, his timing, maybe even his focus. Round after round, Tamberg hung in there, and when the final bell rang, the crowd waited for the inevitable. Then came the shock, a split decision for Tamberg. The New York Times called it the greatest upset in years. Even Tamberg himself couldn't believe it. "I didn't think I had won," he admitted. "I was too much on the defensive in the closing rounds." But the judges had spoken, and just like that, Baksi's world title dream slipped through his fingers. Crushed and bewildered, Baksi took a year away from the ring. Despite the loss, he remained ranked 3rd among the world's heavyweights, behind Jersey Joe Walcott and Ezra Charles, and ahead of his old rival Lee Savile. When he returned, it was to face Charles, a brilliant, dangerous fighter whose name was already echoing through the boxing world. The stakes were high. The winner would earn a shot at Joe Louis himself. Ezra Charles came in as the heavy favorite, and for good reason. Baksi fought bravely, pushing forward, but Charles was too sharp, too quick, too precise. For 10 rounds, he picked Joe apart, landing clean combinations that gradually wore the bigger man down. In the 11th, Charles unleashed a furious assault that forced the referee to stop the fight. It was over. Joe Baksi's dream of challenging Joe Louis had vanished that night. But in the eyes of those who followed his journey, from the dark coal mines of Pennsylvania to the bright arenas of Europe, Baksi's story was still one of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable will of a man who refused to let his circumstances define him. After his loss to Ezra Charles, Joe Baksi's time in the spotlight began to fade. The same man who once stood on the edge of a world title shot now found himself slipping from the headlines. He kept fighting, but only against older, lesser-known opponents, men far removed from the glory days of boxing's golden names. By 1951, the fire that once drove him dimmed, and Joe quietly stepped away from the ring, slipping into a kind of semi-retirement. But the fighter in him never truly died. In 1954, at 32 years old, he decided to give it one last go, one last run to see if the old magic was still there. His comeback started strong. Facing Billy Smith, Baksi came out like it was 1944 all over again. Heavy hands, fierce determination. He ended it in the first round with a knockout that sent the crowd roaring. For a moment, it felt like the old days. Then came Bob, the grinder Baker, a rising star and a 7-5 favorite. This was a different kind of test. Baksi fought with all the heart he had left, absorbing punishment, pushing forward, refusing to quit. But time is undefeated. He no longer had the speed or sharpness that once carried him. After 10 tough rounds, the judges gave Baker the unanimous decision. That night carried a deeper sadness. Baksi's longtime manager, Leo Furizen, collapsed during the fight and passed away in the dressing room shortly after. It was a heartbreaking end to an era. Joe never fought again. He hung up his gloves for good and returned to the kind of hard, honest work he'd known before boxing. This time as a teamster, and later as an ironworker, joining the International Brotherhood of Ironworkers. The man who once stood under the lights of Madison Square Garden now worked under open skies, still driven by the same working man spirit that had always defined him. In August 1977, Joe Baksi passed away from a heart attack at the Albany Medical Center. He was 55 years old. To the end, he remained what he had always been, a fighter, not just in the ring, but in life. From the coal mines of Pennsylvania to the grand stages of the world, Joe Baksi never stopped swinging.